discuss is Saleem Khan, Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Polestar Global. Really good to have you with us. Let me start off by asking you whether you think this new insurance mechanism that the U.S. is introducing is going to move the needle on ships passing through the strait.
Yeah, the new insurance mechanism could potentially provide a new backstop for vessels to potentially move through the Strait of Hormuz. Obviously, war risk insurance has pretty much halted or increased by nearly 1,000% since the start of the conflict. And so introducing this new war risk insurance and insurance capability, $20 billion backstop that the U.S. is introducing, could potentially open up the strait. The other piece of this puzzle is also the question around naval escorts. So will the U.S. Navy and other navies potentially escort vessels that are also insured by this new insurance scheme?
Can I just ask how technically feasible that is? I mean, at one point, the strait is literally only 30 miles wide. How impactful is the naval escort program actually going to be? And could you be also exposing the escorts to the risk of explosions and mines on the strait?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a very tenuous situation. It's about a 21-mile stretch there between the border, therefore the Strait of Hormuz. You potentially have the smaller boats that could be mined coming in to hit U.S. naval vessels. Any vessel trying to pass through that has not reached some sort of negotiation or agreement with Iran could potentially be up for being hit by a drone or a rocket attack. It is, from a physical standpoint, a bit unfeasible, right? You literally have two lanes, one lane in, one lane out. It's a 21-mile stretch that you have to go through. And if you're a large VLCC, very large crude container, you steam at about 10 knots, which is about 15 miles per hour or 20 kilometers per hour. And so you're essentially a sitting duck. You're moving quite slowly through that strait.
And I know it's difficult to say at this point, so if you don't have information, that's fine. But do we understand whether the strait is actually mined already? Do we have that information?
We don't know for sure whether it's mined. We do know, though, that there have been a number of attacks in that area. We've tracked 28 distinct incidents in the Persian Gulf involving everything from vessels being sunk by the IRGC to tankers being set ablaze by the IRGC. And more critically, I should mention, a dozen merchant mariners have been killed. So one big thing we have to remember is that there are about 20,000 merchant mariners that are trapped within the Persian Gulf right now. They cannot leave because of this. But we don't know of any specific mines in the area, but we do know that the IRGC is coordinating attacks, and they seem to cluster right around the Strait of Hormuz, the entry and the exit of the strait.
Yeah, and Saleem, let me just ask you something else. It's not just the threat of being harassed or attacked, but there are other maritime threats as well. And we've reported on signal jamming that's been taking place too. What does your own data suggest?
Yeah, we're seeing a number of different techniques being used here, different techniques, but there's three main behaviors that we're seeing. Number one is GPS spoofing, which is where a ship will kind of deliberately falsify its position. So that's number one, and that's really more a deliberate attempt. The second sort of behavior that we're seeing is signal jamming. That's where navigation systems are disrupted by high-frequency radio signals, typically used in missile defense systems. So these missile defense systems can not only interfere with the automatic identification system, the GPS system on these vessels, it could also interfere with everything from an internet-connected toaster all the way through to these vessels' navigation system. And so those are two items we're seeing. The last item we're seeing here from a vessel positioning standpoint is that some vessels are actually turning off their transponders, their AIS transponders completely. This is a very dangerous scenario for vessels because they could be mistaken for potentially being malicious actors by the U.S. Navy and others that are, having bases there in the Gulf area. you could potentially be attacked if you turn off your transponder. So those are the three main behaviors that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, and yet there are a few vessels and a few ships that are managing to make it through. What do we understand about the nature of those vessels and the types of security arrangements that they would have agreed prior to attempting the transit?
Yeah, so what we're seeing, it's really, I would call it a sort of a tale of two risk appetites. We're seeing Western flagged tonnage or vessels essentially clearing out of the region, but Iranian, Chinese, Indian-linked vessels are still threading the needle through the Strait of Hormuz. And the really concerning part here is these ships are using digital disguises. Every vessel broadcasts its identity through a system called AIS, which I mentioned earlier, the automatic identification system. Think of this as the ship's passport. What we're seeing now is essentially forged passports at sea. These vessels are changing their destination fields mid-voyage to broadcast things like China owner, effectively signaling to the IRGC that they are friendly and they should be let through. We actually verified this just today. There's a tanker called the Bright Gold, which is doing exactly this right now as it transits through the Gulf. So we are seeing some countries have sort of negotiated deals with Iran and are able to safely transit through.
So interesting. Saleem, thank you so much for your time and also for staying up late for us. I know it's late over there in New York. Saleem Khan, Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Polestar Global.